right. Today we're talking about just the reality of all these get rich quick schemes. Does it really exist? What does it mean to get rich quick? And what does it mean to actually be wealthy? So
Well,
we've all heard it.
yeah, we have. I mean, again, when you were a young child, you were the youngest of three. What was the feeling of being rich when you compared
Yeah.
yourself to your brother and your
We talked
sister,
about, I think this also goes to the like saver spender mentality. So at a very young age,
right?
apparently I was a saver, but then I realized that it gave me strategic advantage and some way to leverage my older siblings' dependence on me. So when they were spenders, I was the one who still had all the dollar bills saved up in my little tiny wallet.
That's right.
Had I only known the magic of interest, I really think that would have
Well,
served me
we
well.
we
Talk
had a
about compound
conversation about
interest.
that, and you said, "How much can I charge?" I said, "Do they have any collateral?" You said, "What's collateral?" So explain that to you. And you said, "Oh, they don't have any collateral." I said, "Then you charge them a lot of interest." Credit card
I
companies were
don't
charging
remember that.
30%, and so later on, your brother said, "Okay, um, why don't you borrow it from Laura?" And he said, "Oh no, she's way too expensive."
Yes. There you go.
I like
Exactly.
that. That's
Uh,
really good. Yeah, that's good. But I
Exactly.
think
Teach him a lesson. Somehow we're still friends. So,
yeah,
anyways.
you
yeah.
are still friends.
Well, part of
But
the
it's not,
discussion,
but the issue came in wealth then. What is wealthy? Wealthy means you can control your future. Nothing's going to surprise you that you can't handle, right?
right?
And I think
But is
that
that
really
at a
is that
baseline? Is
really
that
is
in
a
and of itself a myth? I mean, really, who can control their future?
well again,
Right.
I think financially you can. There's just very little that will come at you that you can't control. And you have enough cash sitting aside, but it's the income. If you're in a business that produces income for you, or if you go into a
Right.
business and everything is based upon what its growth potential is, you're always going to be kind of at risk. Sam Walton. I remember there was a man that I read an article that he had an opportunity to review Sam Walton, and Sam Walton actually sat down with him and talked to him about how to build a business. And one of the first things that Sam says, you got to have something on the side. In other words, in addition to your primary focus, but that gives you income. Gives you
Right.
income. So that helps to stabilize your life while you're spending all this time out here building your dream, so to speak. And it was
Right.
really,
Having a backup plan.
yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
practical, right?
Yeah. Well, I think part of the definition or the split between rich and wealthy, there's people who are rich and have a lot of zeros in their bank accounts, right? And they never actually become wealthy. Because I think part of wealthy is moving beyond just having money. It's having that confidence. It's having that
Yeah.
that purpose. It's having that stability, and that doesn't come for everybody. Some people can have a lot of money, but they stay rich. They never transition to wealthy.
Well,
Yeah.
it goes back to
I,
that conversation about the millionaire next door.
mhm.
And a lot of people that you maybe cross paths with, you don't know what their wealth is because they don't display it. They don't
Mm,
they don't put it out there.
mm,
And those are the people that I think have underpinnings of true wealth because
yeah,
Yeah.
they're not pushed to do anything.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, one
I
of
mean,
the
absolutely. You can drive through the most wealthiest neighborhoods, even in the humble city that we live in here in the Inland Empire. And, you go into the neighborhoods that have the largest homes in our city, and you see one right next to another where one has just obviously become dilapidated, is, in disrepair, right? Whoever made that purchase at one point assumed that they would have a wealthy lifestyle. And
right.
that to me is kind of the definition of rich versus wealth. Not just did you
Mm,
create wealth at one point in time, but were you able to maintain it? And I think to your point, Jeremiah, there is a mindset shift along the way that has to occur, versus that kind of just get rich quick, like that one time event in your life. How do you actually create the sustainability for that?
yeah.
So,
One of the definitions people use is say wealth is being able to do what I want, when I want to, with the people I want to. And I don't know
mm,
if that's an accurate one, but the idea to say, some people who are very rich, they have a great business, they have a great job, they lack wealth because their family doesn't want to hang out with them, right?
Mm.
Or they can't ever get away. They can't ever, stop working. And so to be able to do what you want, when you want, with the people you want to do it with, I think is there's a relational aspect there. There's a time value there. And I don't know if that's the same
mhm,
definition for everybody, but I think it's useful as we kind of have this conversation. What we're talking about a lot today is saying, how do you go from building finances, building kind of riches, transitioning that into being wealthy? And part of what we're talking today is we have a number of clients who have sold businesses, who have retired, who have had all sorts of moments of an exit. But then they kind of have to go through a process of adjusting not just their mindset, but also the way that their money is invested, because they're no longer concentrating to build their business, no longer concentrating to build their skill sets. They now want to diversify and make sure that their finances can allow them the freedom, whatever, however they define that, whether it's the
Hmm.
freedom to do what they want, whether it's the freedom to live in a certain way, maybe even just the freedom to be able to retire, right? For some people, it's just, I just want to be able to not be able to go to work tomorrow and still be able to pay all my bills. So that wealth, I think, can be at so many different levels, but
Oh, for sure.
it's an adjustment.
Right. We talked about that strategy of like building up net worth, but really it's only one half of the puzzle. So when you really are looking at wealth, to me, we're thinking balance sheet. We're taking the net of not just your net worth, but also the liabilities. And there's a very real tug in, especially I'll just talk in American culture, as you continue to grow and gain net worth, there is expectations regarding the types of cars that you drive, the type of homes that you own, the clothing that you have. I mean, we are a consumer driven culture, and this is not going to shock any of our listeners. We all know it because we live it every single day. The hard part is to live a life that resists it, resists the tug of having a lifestyle creep together with the growth of your net worth. So
Mm,
now I'm at this level. Well, doesn't that mean that I then have also earned the right to own a boat, own this fancy car, right? So when I think of wealth, I love your definition, Jeremiah. I also think not net worth, I think balance sheet. What's the net when we're looking at not
Hmm.
just your value, but your liabilities too. So
mhm. Yeah, and one overlay I'd put on that is also the cash flow. To say, do you have the right amount of things, balance the assets versus liabilities, but do you have a cash flow that's usable? That's
mhm.
functionable. To pay for. I just met with a client yesterday who, her husband was a teacher and for many years. They worked tightly through their budget. He's now passed away, but she was making the comment that she has like a CalPERS or CalSTRS pension. So get CalSTRS, they get Social Security. They made some great investments. So she has this income that she's almost drowning in income. She has too much. She's like,
Right.
what do I do with all this? So we're talking about how do we benefit the family? How do we benefit the things that she cares about? But they worked hard throughout their years to now she's in a spot where she doesn't have a large balance sheet, but she does have overwhelming
Right.
cash flow at the moment for her lifestyle. And so for her, she can do
Mhm.
anything she wants anytime, right? Because she can just cash flow those needs. So I think it's important, and not having a like a liquidity trap of people who just run out of funds, even though, hey, I've got
Mhm.
all this great stuff in real estate, they just run out of money. So I think that's an overlay. But to really get that
So
freedom.
this is this is a great transition, this topic, because how much cash, right? Like, how much cash should you keep on hand? And if so, where and how do you hold it? This is a conversation
Hmm.
we have on a frequent basis with our clients. And, what we're talking about is making sure that you have some reserves, right? You have something on hand that doesn't mean that you're fearful of what's to come, but you want to be opportunistic. You want to be prepared, right? You want
Right.
to try to reduce your risk across the board. And what does that look like? So let's talk a little bit about that. Right, clients of all different levels, of all different status. When we're talking
Mm.
about cash, how much cash, and when and how to keep it invested or not invested, right? So, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I think an entrepreneur, you always have to have the conversation, is this a one and done? Or is it a mindset? Are they going to go after another project? So the time it takes, I mean, if you look at most entrepreneurs, they either kind of fell into it. They either work for a company or it became a preference. So they went after that preference and it made it. I think most entrepreneurs, from their strategic planning standpoint, will wake up after they make money and they'll say, wow, I was lucky because they'll have
Mm-hmm.
a whole line of other similar entrepreneurs that failed. And I think the biggest thing you can do is you have to assess why you had success and why others did not. So again, after you have reached success, and you have either sold your business or it starts to become a income generating machine that you can build additional wealth outside of the company itself. But I think you have to really stop and take a look at why you are doing this. It could be that
Mhm.
you were in a situation where the opportunities were there and you just had the right product or service to take advantage of those things, and you made a lot of money. Well, again, what happens if that all goes away? What if the economy changes on you? And where's your flexibility? So getting back to the cash situation, it just allows you flexibility. You can retool your company. I look at
Mhm.
restaurants. Restaurants have the highest failure rate of
Mm,
any entrepreneurial business. They have something like, I forget what it is, like 95%, 98% are not in business after a certain period of time. Um, and it it shows that you lock into something and you continue to work the model, but you could be just working it down. You're just going down a path that's never going to give you the exact optimum value for what you do. So anyway, I think
mm,
there are cash, getting back to our original comment, building up cash and keeping it liquid. First of all, you reduce your debt, you build up a portfolio. You I always like education. Education, how do you spend the money maybe to improve yourself in your chosen field or to look at something else? The more you know, the better your choices are going to be.
mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think there's
Mhm.
an element I see is when people, sell a company or they retire, they have some cash out moment. Often they then think, got to get this cash to work. I got to get this reinvested. To your comment, Laura, and sometimes that means the market. Oftentimes we have people that feel, hey, I should have some real estate deals. I should have some private placements. They want to kind of move into this realm of investments they never did before that feel like this is what rich, wealthy people do. And
Right.
I should be a part of that now. And some of those are great. We've helped many clients put into all sorts of great real estate and private placement type investments. But the unique aspect of those is often they are not liquid. They lock up and they're not accessible and they have higher risk of failure or success. And so often we'll have clients that sell a business, say, and they want to get all the money somewhere to be working for them. And to that
Mhm.
comment, to realize, hey, I'm going to need to keep more liquidity perhaps than I did before because I used to have this business that was paying me every month. I don't anymore. I need to live off of it in a different way. And so to get
Mhm.
their money, deployed and working, but it's a different mix than just all of it goes in, all of it gets locked away. It needs to be a little bit to say this amount gets invested for my future. This amount is for my near future. This amount is
Right.
available for today. And to your comment, Laura, your specific question, like I don't think there's a specific number or a ratio of what cash is appropriate. It all really depends on where they're headed, what they're about, and what they're going to need this cash for. We have one client specifically that they have really strong pensions, and so even though they exited their jobs and they got some larger one-time bits of money, they can invest very aggressively and lock up everything because they had this continual good income. Whereas most folks, that's not the case. When they exit, this is it. And they've sold their business or something. They've got to make this last. And so we look a lot with, what's their lifestyle need? What are their future foreseeable needs need? And then what's the long-term play
Right.
is like a
Mhm.
really, really important to consider.
Mhm. So we're talking about this arc of like, over the season of it could be a business owner, it could be an entrepreneur, it could be somebody who has really just focused, concentrating their asset to build their wealth. And, there are things along the way that can erode your wealth slowly but surely. And we talked about kind of lifestyle changes or consumer driven changes, increase in debt, finally, when you've kind of
Mm,
accumulated a pile of capital and you want to leverage that to the max for the next opportunity. These are things that we identify in some of our clients as mechanisms that can erode your wealth over time. So I like what we're talking about in terms of cash. Jeremiah, you mentioned real estate, which is when we're talking about going from rich to wealthy. I think we're also talking about a duration. We're talking about something that's built over time. We're talking about utilizing capital in a strategic way. When we talk about diversification, reserving some in cash, right? That's kind of like a
Right.
safety lever that gives you, that retains your purchasing power in the market. Um, And so instead of just, kind of one-off, sort of growth, we're talking about performance over time and average return so that we can weather the storms. I mean, just in the last decade, right? Think about significant changes in returns in the marketplace. We had the
Yeah.
impact of COVID. Now we've got the impact of AI. We had a big change in political legislation right, that when we talk to our clients about return, we're talking on averages over time. So, the mentality that I have versus rich, how to get rich, and then how to preserve wealth has a lot to do with that like duration model as well. Like, what are we
Mm-hmm.
talking about for long term principles that'll serve us well? So,
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the thought being, what if the market took a 20 to 30% downturn? How
hmm
many people would say, yeah, my lifestyle wouldn't change. I would just continue doing the things I'm doing. I know long term it'll come back, but in the short term, that doesn't really affect me. And how many people would say, oh, cancel that trip. We're not going. I gotta, downsize. How many people would have reactions there? And I think that's part of the wealth, I guess, that concept, not the actual money, but the mindset of wealth to say, my wealth is deployed in such a way that if there's a 20 or 30% downturn in the market, real estate market, stock market, whatever market you're looking at, that they're able to say, oh, okay, that's fine, and move on, and that not to impact their behavior or their lifestyle. That's a benefit for a lot of people. That's a privilege to be
hmm
able to a spot like that.
And it's rare for somebody to go, no matter what their wealth is. But the wealth effect, when you see a downturn in your holdings, it is rare that people can keep an even emotional value through that. So when they see it,
Mm-hmm.
they think the world is falling apart, and sometimes they can't see that this is just a cycle, and that's where cash comes into it. So if somebody has a mindset, this is just a cycle, they have the money to take advantage of that and buy up other assets that are cheaper and accumulate them. And when the market turns, they can then deploy that and they can get the advantage of when that market cycles out. But the wealth effect is in other words, emotionally, when you
hmm
lose $2 versus if you gain $2, the impact is much harder on the loss than it
Mm,
is on the gain. And
hmm
and that's been tested by just about every psychologist, every financial um, person that looks at the psychology of wealth. People don't handle loss very well. I mean, they just don't. So they've got to be able to check their emotions, or they got to come alongside of somebody that checks their emotions. Because
Right.
most people, what they want to do is hit the sell button and they want to go back to cash. But I think it's an opportunity for an entrepreneur or even for a good investor, right?
Right. And I think underlying that, there is a precursor to like, what is your emotional response and attachment to when things are going well, when things are going
mm,
right, when you have made that investment and you see it skyrocket? Or I just looked up the statistic in preparation for this about lottery winners. They win big. And the Certified Financial Planning website said that about a third of lottery winners will, whether immediately or down the road, declare bankruptcy.
Yep.
So you think about the devastation in that moment when they say, "Hey, wait a second, I was at the peak," or so they perceived, and now I'm in the bottom. I wasn't prepared for this, and I wonder, there's that emotional response when you lose the $2. But I also wonder, it takes an emotionally mature person to also analyze what they're feeling when they gain the $2 and how that
Right.
impacts their habits and their choices. And I mean, we can all preach to the choir here, right? What level of ambition turns to greed? What's our appetite for growth, and are we staying a sober-minded individual along the way and keeping
Right.
hold of the things that are most important to us?
Well, again, it comes down to value. How do you value your work? Who are you working for? Are you just
Mhm.
working for you to put
Mhm.
money in a bank account? Are you working for your family? Are you working for the other people that you feel strongly about that you can help? So again, your energy level starts to become much more beneficial and you get more energy if you're not working for yourself. You're actually working for somebody else. Now, at the end of the day, you may get rewarded, but that's not your primary reason for working, right?
yeah.
It,
Mhm.
it's it's another reason.
Yeah. Well, I think, Laura, based on your comment, there's a hot take here for, just, I'm sure I'll offend some people, but like gold at the moment. We have a number of clients who gold has gone through the roof and they are sitting on these more gains in the last 2 years than they had in the last 10 years combined. This really wonderful moment. And what do? Right? It's a moment. Do you say, this has served my family well? I'm going to exit. And, there's tax things, all sorts of considerations, right? So you should look at the whole picture. But others say, well, now it feels like a trophy. It feels like, look how well I did, or it'll never go down, or this is just the beginning. It's going to keep on going. None of those are wrong, but it is an interesting moment to say there's a lot of people who just got that analogy of $2, right? I just got the benefit. A lot of people who held gold have
Mhm.
just had this uptick. Then what do you do with it? Do you diversify it? Do you keep it? Like I said, not necessarily right or wrong answers, but it is a good one to look at. Gold has been down. There's been people who've liked gold and just it didn't do as much as they hoped it would. Someday it might. Well, we just had a someday. It
Yeah, we
just
just had
did.
it someday, right?
Right. And so now the
Yep.
question being, what do you do with this to really benefit your future? So you're not just watching the gold prices, but rather you can have that freedom and that wealth.
Yeah, and
Right.
I think the
Right.
other issue is like going back to commodities. A lot of people don't understand what drives price either up or down. It
Mhm.
is they feel fortunate if they've got some because it goes up, but then the other question is what do they do with it? If they're sitting on a lot of profit, or if it goes down, do they just continue to stay in the stream? I mean, people are just they're not they're not investing from a long-term strategy when you do that. Oftentimes it's the emotion behind actually holding the asset. And that is it has a lot of complexity to it. And you want to
Mhm.
make sure that whatever the value is for you, why do you know why you hold it? And is what's the reason? You're just going to give that to your kids, your grandchildren, or is it creating income for you? And anyway, so there's a
Yeah.
lot of psychology here on
Yeah.
commodities, right?
So just to wrap this up in our time, so we've talked about not just the get rich quick scheme, right? But how do you actually become a wealthy person over time? I love, Dad, what you shared about ultimately it's a mindset, right? Like, who are you working for or what are you working for? Is it a legacy? Is it charity, right? What's the number that you're working for and why? And if you've surpassed that number, who gets to benefit from that?
Hmm.
We talked about, there's a level of risk that might have been taken. Um, in order to gain wealth or to get rich quick, right? To gain the assets on the balance sheet, but there's a level of humility that's involved in preserving that wealth over time, and there's a need for diversification and kind of purpose to it. So talking
Sure.
about diversification and durable capital. So anyways, lots of we kind of overlaid not just like psychological and behavioral characteristics that we see in people that are wealthy, but also some actual just practical investment strategies. So hopefully this is helpful.
Yeah. Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review, even if it's not 5 stars. We welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordatvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordatvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.